town is our new home. So all of this was coming down, preparing for the move, rehearsing in the new building, because it is the most green and efficient and technologically advanced skyscraper in the world.
All right.
It is amazing. If you read about this building, you will be in awe of what they have done to make this efficient. We are completely green. We are paper-free. We are digital. We don't even have, we have to like do phone calls through our computer. I'm like, what? So at the time that she was making the request, all of management was preparing for this move, as were all of us on the staff. And so to be able to just get the typical permission, which would take a little bit less time, became a difficult thing. But she was so politely tenacious. Everybody was very excited. Everybody kept saying yes, 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 but the email never went out. Finally it went out, and then she was relieved. But she's been so gracious to work with. So this has been so very exciting to be part of this. A couple of things before we start the little PowerPoint that I have. First of all, this is, I've been here in Philadelphia for 2 years. Is there anybody here from Chicago? In the Midwest, okay. I worked in Chicago for a good 16 years. I also worked in Milwaukee for a bit, had a stint in Florida, and in California. Anybody from any of those states?
Hey.
Okay, great, there you go. I was very excited when I looked at who was sponsoring the bill, that 3 of the states I spent most of my life in. Growing up in Southern California, working as a meteorologist for a bit in Florida, and then working the bulk of my career in the Chicago area, that those were all the people that were behind sponsoring this. Those were the primary states. So that was very exciting. It's like, okay, I feel like I'm in tune now. Another thing is that climate change used to always be global warming. Is something I've been passionate about since about the year 2000. I was one of the very first people in Chicago to even do, in fact, I think I was the first person on air to do an in-depth piece, and that was only because CBS did the tipping point. So the tipping point story allowed bosses to say, well, okay, we'll do this. This isn't so strange or sensitive. But you have to remember, that wasn't that long ago where it was all fuzzy math and crazy science and a big gray zone out there. And corporate America, and especially television news stations, did not want to dip their toe into a pool that they could turn around and be embarrassed by. That was the feeling. They wanted to make sure that this was something rock solid. And certainly this has come a long way. Now there's no fear of dipping. There's just like, let's dive in. So that is a very good thing. Another thing that encourages me, I look around this room, I didn't know what to expect when I got here. As far as, I knew there would be a lot of people here from a lot of different places. Who came the furthest, by the way? Let's see. West Coast? Wait, where? California?
San Diego, but I don't count.
Okay, no, I grew up in San Diego. Ramona, California, okay? There you go. And you do count. You count a lot. Anyway, so I looked around the room and I thought, these are seasoned, smart people. These are nothing against college students, because we all were college students at one point, but you all are smart. You have seen everything and you understand what's at stake here. And that makes me so excited, because I thought, it's going to be a much harder sell, and I am no spring chicken. So trust me, I'm not a millennial, and I am right on the cusp of the actual baby boom. Anyway, but the thing is that it is exciting to have experience and knowledge at the helm of all of this, to be able to pass it down, because, as my mom always tells me, you'll find out when you raise your own kids. And I am one. We have one, and he tests every nerve. Anyway, so what I thought I would do is put together just a brief presentation. I work a lot with Climate Central, thank you, in just down the road in Princeton. Do many of you know Climate Central and Climate Matters? They're terrific. And Bernadette, Sean, all of them, amazing to work with. And they do a really good job putting together graphics and presentations and information. And they're able to just drill right down and get the most important and accurate information and go right to the source, which is just an extremely valuable asset. So when you're in the media, that's what you want. You get deluged all day long with story ideas. You have roller skating shoes, and you have lipstick that will make your eyelashes curl too. I mean, all kinds of things that they send you. and weather stories and environmental stories, many of which are questionable. But it's really nice to be able to have them right down the road. And I've known Bernadette and Sean for decades. I hate saying that. Gosh, the older you get. Anyway, so they asked me to talk a little bit about communicating climate risks through the media. Now, it's no surprise that the media is the voice for a lot of things. It doesn't matter, if it's a news story or a weather story. I'm a meteorologist, and I am very passionate about weather. I'm very passionate about climate. I'm very passionate about environment. But there's also an issue of you have this much time to cram this much stuff into a newscast. But we do have other platforms. We have digital, we have social, and so we're able to expand out now, which is really important. I think I went away.
You just have to touch it. Yeah.
Just touch it and it'll come back.
Should.
It's that
Next to
simple.
you.
That's okay. There we go. No? Okay, now I went too fast. I went too far. Okay. It doesn't like me. We have the same computer too.
Yes, that's good.
Okay.
There's still no signal?
When you moved it.
That's right. Well, we'll do what I do when we have a weathercast go crazy and all the graphics die, or we don't have a green screen anymore, we have a touch wall. I'll just ask you all to shut your eyes and we'll tell you a little story that you can imagine in your mind. I usually do that for about a minute 30.
Did it come unplugged when you moved it?
Yeah, it was when you moved the box that it.
Unplug and plug it back in.
Maybe I'll do it.
Oh!
Yay! Okay, well, I'm not going to touch it. I'm just going to go right here. Are we good to go? Okay. All right. So we'll start here. The picture at the top, many of you might recognize this picture. This is from Harvey. This is just one of those many, many pictures. But the whole idea is to personalize things. No more global blankets talking about this. No more national. I mean, that's sort of just like a nugget in there. You have to talk about climate change and the risks and make it very personal. And you have to use pictures like this, and you have to have it driven home to people. This cannot just be a polar bear in the Antarctic or something. I mean, that's great, and it makes us all feel bad, but that's not going to get the effect that you want. I guess the best way to describe it is, there was a teacher strike in Los Angeles. That's a horrible thing, right? I mean, think of all those kids and all those teachers, and it's just a nightmare, and the parents, and how many of you were absolutely touched right here, had firsthand, your family or somebody in your family by that teacher strike? Okay, so there are a few people here. The rest of us sympathize, but it does not hit us right here. The same thing with the furlough, with the government shutdown. That was horrible. We all agree that's been awful for everybody that's gone through this and this back and forth. But unless you were directly one of those people, or your family member, or you were affected monetarily, it's not going to have the same effect. So you really have to find a way to personalize it. Now, certainly, this is not me. I've never been wading through the water in a boat. I have done other things that have been disaster related, but the closer you can get to making this personal is what you want to do. So here's a little evolution of broadcast meteorologists. That's my team over at NBC 10, our first alert team. In 2001, 22% of broadcast meteorologists believed that global warming was happening. 58% did not believe, or they said they didn't believe, or their management didn't want them to believe, and 20% had absolutely no response. 2008, 45% believed. Okay, we're making some headway. That's doubling right there. 35% no, this is crazy, because there are people on both sides of this argument that make good arguments, and 20% were still neutral, meaning management didn't want them to take a point of view. 2011, 54% believe climate change is happening. 25% do not believe. 21% are unsure. Not sure if it's happening or why exactly it's happening. 2017, 90% say yes, it is happening. Climate change is happening. 80% believe it is human caused. That's a long way to go. I mean, in the broadcast meteorologist community, you're talking about 1,200, 1,400 people here, and then you've got retired ones. that's not 1,400 people, I'm sorry. You're talking about, thousands of broadcast meteorologists. I'm just thinking like markets and number of stations. And if you have 90% of them believing that the viewers have an interest in this, then you're going to start driving the stories. Now, they're not going to be long stories. There's not a news story at my station, unless it's a special investigative thing, that is going to be more than a minute 30. They're usually a minute 10 long. And when it comes to weather, they want all of our stories to be very short and brief, because we have to do our weathercast and we have to shoehorn that story in there. So this is, I think, great progress right there. And I'll tell you this, the reason so many of my colleagues fell into the do not believe or neutral category was because they needed the evidence to be able to stand in front of a television camera and their management and say, here are the stone cold facts. And there was such a gray zone before. There were so many scientists on this side and that side, and there was politics involved, and there was corporate money involved, and there were lobbyists involved. So now it is more of a clear-cut science, which is really, really an important thing. So this is one of my colleagues from South Carolina, and Jim Gandy has been tremendous. He works with Climate Central, and he was the first one they used as a guinea pig to do these little vignettes on air. Now, you gotta remember, coming out of South Carolina is not particularly a place that you would think would be embracing of climate change or global warming. Wrong. Their ratings soared whenever he had one of these stories, and it was because people had a thirst for the information. They wanted information. They wanted to make up their own mind, but they wanted to have the information from a trusted source, and he's a very trusted source. He's been there like 1,000 years. But he is a warm man, an intelligent man, and he is a respectful man. So the message that we are trying to deliver, and we need to deliver, and you need to deliver, it doesn't matter if you're writing up a press release, if you're talking to the press, if you're talking to the neighbor, it's the KISS method. You have got to keep that thing simple, really simple. Avoid information overload. Do not be talking about the global thing. You want to tell neighborhood stories. You're not going to tell somebody in Denver that the sea level rise is going to inundate houses in New Jersey, because they don't care. They want to know about the snow, about the pests, about the drought. They want to know about things that are going to affect them in their neighborhood, right down to their street. You want to focus on the hyper-local, and that's something that we're trying to do, is to make it more localized to the cities and the communities that we're in. You want to give people a reason to care. You don't want to tell them about the polar bear. Sure, you can tell them about the polar bear, but the polar bear is sort of an aside, a water cooler fact at this point. You want to tell them about what is going to happen to their job, their kid's future, their house on their block, that address. They need to know specifically. You want to empower individuals. That's one thing, let people speak. Give them the opportunity to speak. Tell them it's great to speak. Get out and speak. I think we're to the point now with climate change where that is good. So many people were afraid to speak before, and I know it was difficult. I was in Tampa. I was the first female chief meteorologist in Tampa. And the 4 men at the other stations, awesome guys. I know them all. They're amazing. So I get a phone call from a publication that wants to ask my point of view on climate change. This was in 2010, I believe. And right away I said, yeah, it's happening. I said, there's a lot of questions as to how quickly, it looks like, the timeline is out there. And yes, human causation is, at this point, the forerunner as to why this is all happening. I didn't hesitate to say that. I didn't know what my colleagues said. None of them said that. One of them said, look, I can't even get Saturday's forecast right, so how am I supposed to talk about this? The other one said, I can't comment, management. I mean, they're all smart guys, and they're all smart guys that agree with this. But at the end of the day, when the thing came published, I guess I was excited that they said I had the guts to say it. I was the only one. But I was sad because I knew that my colleagues felt that way. So now we don't have that anymore. We have empowerment. It does not matter if you're in any part of the media, if you're a news reporter, if you're a meteorologist, if you're on the radio, television, if you're just at home and you have an awesome social media page, get your Insta going with things, snapshots, pictures, things that have to do with climate change. Clarity between fact and fiction is very important, and there is so much still out there that is not clear. So you really have to fact check, we have to fact check, and make sure. And when we're keeping it simple, if you've ever watched the nightly news, any of the channels, those stories, those big national stories are about 1 minute long. Sometimes they're only 50 seconds long, but they feel longer sometimes. They get a lot of fact in there because they're careful with their words. Use public speak, and I'll go over that in just a moment. Talk the way the public talks. Use layman's terms. Intelligent, we're not talking down to people, but do not use all these scientific terms that immediately, people are like, that's it. They've just tuned out because you just lost them. You really want to continue to engage them. Avoid politics. It isn't a political issue. This is not a political issue. My gosh. I love to tell people, I've worked for Fox and I've worked for NBC. So I have worked both sides of what people perceive to be the spectrum, but in all reality, local television reflects your local community. It's not the national, but people still think, oh, you work for Fox? Oh, okay. Bill, all right. Okay. Oh, you work for NBC? Mm-hmm. Matt, louder. But no, the reality is local television news reflects local. And I'm a meteorologist, so if I talk about climate change or tornadoes or anything else, I'm talking from science. I don't control the weather, I just report it. I just report on what's going on. I wish I could control the weather because it would not be 26 degrees outside today. Think about this. Here's something, just a quick aside. In Chicago, I think below zero and then single digits yesterday. All next week in Chicago, it is going to be several days that will probably not top zero for a daytime high. We're not talking wind chill. It'll be the polar vortex, just like 2014. And I only know this because I still have so many friends and family back there. So all next week, think of all the people that are going to be saying, where's that global warming now? Yeah. Because that always comes up. And then you have to explain to them, oh, it's over in China, it's on the other side of the planet. Because there's things called Rossby waves that go around, so where it dips here, it goes up there. But people don't always think that. They just think that how cold it's been. By the way, we've been warmer than average for the last 2 months of the winter here in this part of the United States. And we may go cold in February, but when we average out our winter, it's going to be a warmer than average winter. We were 60 2 days ago. Another thing is corporations make the change. One thing that people don't realize is that they think that they've got to have the government making the change. The government just has to get out of the way and clear the roadway, clear that runway, so the grassroots efforts can do what they need to do. So the corporations can do what they need to do, because this is all going to be money driven in the United States. Corporations will find a way to make money, and they will do this much faster than the government. It takes forever for the wheels of government to turn. As you know, with your bill, it's just a crazy thing. So this is going to be something that is going to be a corporate focal point worldwide. And some people like that. Some people are nervous about it, but that's the truth of the matter. You need to stress immediacy. We try to stress immediacy. If there is something that's a big story, you want to stress why it's important, and it's important right now. It's not important 50 years from now. We've looked down the line. 50 years from now, all these houses are going to have flooding on a regular basis. They're going to have king tides, things going on. We need immediacy right now, and why it's important right now. We need to feature more grassroots efforts. So if you have stories in your own town, make them short, concise, clear, personal. Make them something that is going to be relative to the viewers, even if it's just one community within the city. If you're in San Diego, make it about Encinitas. If you're in Philadelphia, make it about Bala Cynwyd. If you're in Florida, make it about Tampa. Just make it about a particular area, not the entire state, not the entire nation. And finally, invite respectful discussion. People aren't always going to agree with you. There are people that are fearful of anything to do with legislation because they think it's going to affect their lifestyle as far as restrictions on things they normally do. Not that they're going to be pumping, fumes out with their car, but things that they normally do. And they're fearful about the money. What is this going to cost me? Certainly in the end, we all know corporations, that trickles down. I mean, when there's an elevated cost in the dairy industry, does milk go up? How about when there's some sort of a problem at the petroleum plants? Oh, yep, gasoline goes up. So people are worried. They're going to be told what to do now. People don't want more restrictions, a lot of people. And they also are worried about the money. That seems to be the basis of a lot of this. So when you have respectful discussion, and you respect their point of view, no matter how incorrect you think it is, because they're looking at you the same way, you get things done, which you already know by talking to both sides of the aisle. It's respectful. It's not name calling. It's not going on to Twitter. It's none of that. So, help me help you, please, as Jerry McGuire said. We need the message from you that we're going to turn around and try to get out on any of our platforms to be short, clear, visual, personal, deeply personal. Not just a picture of Harvey, unless you're talking specifically about Houston and you're in Houston. We need it to be personal, right down to the street, right down to what you like to eat, your children's future, the school, your job. We need it to be local. We need it to be available. We need to have availability to talk to people and that story available to show if we want to go out and shoot it or show it or talk about it. And we need it to be verified. We're going to do some verification, but if there is any fuzziness at all, that story dies. It dies so fast. Because in a half-hour newscast, there may be 21, 22 minutes worth of news. And let me see, yesterday, we had some people calling sick, and so that I could get here and not work the 11 p.m. news last night, I did the 11 a.m. I'm supposed to have 5 weather hits. I had 1.5 weather hits because, of course, we had Mr. Stone arrested in Florida. We had somebody in a trench in northern Delaware, a cave-in on a trench, so we spent a good bit of time on that. We did have a station initiative giving money, part of a group giving money to an educational institution, so of course we had to show that. And then all the other news of the day. So all of this got crammed in there, and my time was gone. So if you want us to be able to help you, either a reporter or a meteorologist, you need to kind of follow all of these things. Now, up next is, I think, a very good report by one of my colleagues. She's not a meteorologist, and this was in conjunction with Weather Central. So watch this, and then afterward, I'll kind of get your feeling on how you feel about it. I think she hit a lot of the points, but this was just recently. Can you hear it? No. Okay. Yeah, I had it all the way up. Maybe I
Put
can
your
stick
mic
the
at it.
Mic up? Okay. That's okay. You know what? We will.
Put your mic right there.
Yeah.
Setting sound.
All right. So let's put this on pause. Or are we gonna have to?
You just have to change the output settings.
Sorry, technologically I do know how to do this. My computer is sitting over there, so.
Settings.
It's just one little video.
Yes. Go ahead. Sound. And then we need to change the sound.
And now we're gonna look at all of Sabrina's personal things.
That's a good tutorial.
She's got her tax return, and she's got something for somebody's nose. There's a permission slip.
Yeah, we got 9 permission slips from under 18. People on that.
Nice.
You can turn it back on.
Yeah. Play from here.
It's coming out here now. Where's the volume on the? No, it's coming out now, but it's just not. We don't have the volume.
Okay. We're gonna escape
Oh,
one.
well, I think
Wait,
she's gonna
one
do
second.
it. She's gonna fix it here. Hold on 1 second. She's got it, I think.
It does take a village, doesn't it? That's the craziest thing. I'm gonna go back. There. Now we can restart it. And I've only been in the media industry for 24 years. So this is embarrassing. Yes?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead. That's a good time to ask a question. Yes.
Where did your stats on media attitudes towards climate change come from?
Those came from several studies. I got some of them from Climate Central. I got some of them through Dr. Richard Somerville, PhD, he's professor emeritus from Scripps Institute of Oceanography at UCSD. I've become friends with him at different speaking events and conferences. We've run into each other. So he's published a lot on this, and he was part of some of the earlier IPCCs. But there are stats out there that you can look at. Also the AMS, they've run a number of, I don't want to say polls, but they've all of their members have filled out things and they've sent them in. So it's through different organizations.
Do you get personally surveyed?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, no, I've been surveyed so many times. George Washington University did a large group of surveys. This has been going on for, I think the original survey that I was involved in wasn't the early one in like 2000, 2001. That would have been the one about 2007 was the first one that I actually was asked to be part of. And after that, a lot of people just didn't want to acknowledge it. So now it really is a huge jump. If you go to a conference, if you go to an AMS conference or a National Weather Association conference, you end up having a very robust talk about this. I can tell you in 2010, they had roundtable meetings at the National AMS, the annual meeting, about how to sit and discuss this with people. Because people could not discuss it civilly in a room. It would turn into a shouting match, yeah?
Can you summarize what your colleague was about to say?
Yes, I guess so.
Next slide.
Can we try one more time?
We'll try one more time.
Yeah, sorry,
Okay.
the failure. Right?
That's okay.
Good morning. I'm Rosemary Cummings for NBC 10 at Issue. We begin today with an alarming new study that examines the impact of the ocean at our door. After the devastation of Superstorm Sandy, communities in our area began to rebuild. But according to Climate Central, an independent organization of scientists and journalists, those new and renovated houses are right smack in the middle of areas vulnerable to ocean flooding. Ocean County, New Jersey is #1 on the list of counties with the highest number of new homes at risk, about 1,300. Cape May County is #2 with more than 800 homes at risk. And Sussex County, Delaware is 3rd with almost 750 new houses at risk. Again, we're only talking about new or rehabbed homes. And what's behind this threat? Well, according to Climate Central, it's climate change. Take a look at what could happen down the shore. You can see over the years, as the sea level rises, land begins to disappear. From the Jersey Shore, let's look further south to Delaware and Maryland. A similar picture at their shore points. And Philadelphia isn't spared. Climate change and the rising sea level will impact the city as well. Joining me now is John Upton. Upton is a science journalist with Climate Central. He works hand in hand with the researchers to turn their data into information we can all understand. John, thanks for being with us.
It's great to be with you.
So you were telling me you were surprised to see New Jersey, Delaware at the top of your list.
So I think that, when you look at sea level rise risks and you look at new construction around America in vulnerable areas, we all tend to think about Florida. They're very pro-development down there and they have a lot of coastline. But what we saw is when we're talking about houses built since 2010 in areas that are going to be flooding once a year by 2050, the end of a typical mortgage, we really see the risks are being concentrated in the mid-Atlantic.
You talk about a mortgage, say a 30-year mortgage. So let's say you put up a new home down the shore and in 30 years, you're saying it's going to be inundated.
It'll be inundated once a year. We're not necessarily taught storms will come, storms will wash away houses, there'll be devastation from hurricanes as there would be without climate change. But what we're also seeing is this incremental increase in sea level. So what that's meaning is that sometimes you might build your house on stilts, it might be elevated, so you're protecting your property that way. But if the roads around are inundated, how do you access it? How do you raise a family in a house like that? If it's a vacation property on the Jersey Shore, maybe there's an increasing amount of times during the year that you can't access it. So you're paying property taxes, you're paying a mortgage for a property that is becoming less and less useful to you. And we're talking about thousands of properties facing these risks simultaneously. So it's not clear exactly how this is going to play out on America's coastlines. What we can see is that communities that are already dealing with this, from Miami up to New York and beyond, people who are seeing monthly flooding of their streets and sometimes their porches, they want to get out of there.
Right.
But their property values are now so low because people don't want to live there that they can't sell, so they feel very stuck. And you know, it's going to be up to local government, state government, federal government to try to think about how can we move people away from these vulnerable areas in ways that keep communities together, keep families together, that protect our tax base, our collective money, but also, you know, are sensitive to the needs of people who have been living in these coastal areas and just going to be facing more and more risks.
You talk about yearly flooding. Obviously, 2012, we had Superstorm Sandy, and some spots along the Jersey Shore were spared more than others. I happened to be stationed on Long Beach Island, which was practically washed away. I mean, I literally saw homes that were cut in half by the ocean, just completely breaching the street and breaching neighborhoods. And I wonder, okay, so we have flooding every year. What kind of flooding are we talking about? Is it like a storm of the century, or are these more minimal types of storms that come through?
So it's easy to conceptualize, you know, the impacts from these huge storms, and we will continue to see lots of effects from storms such as Florence, such as Sandy, and climate change is actually making these storms worse. It's intensifying them. It's causing more rain. It's causing more wind. It's also raising sea levels. But there's another type of flooding that doesn't make the news quite as much. And it's typically called nuisance flooding. It's where your streets will be inundated, say once a month, so you have to park your car somewhere else. Maybe you have to pay to park your car for a day. So we will see houses being lost, we'll see lives being destroyed, we'll see lives being lost. At the same time, we're going to see this much lower level, but also highly impactful issue of increasing levels of flooding that come with high tides or maybe a minor storm. And people are going to have to learn to adjust to these impacts. They already are. And oftentimes they're going to want to get out of there.
The nuisance flooding, as you describe it. It's interesting because I spend my summers down the shore. I have since I was a kid. Obviously, I'm a native of Philadelphia. And after Superstorm Sandy, of course, you saw homes continuing to be built up. And they seem to be being built much higher, you know, above street level. As you said, some homes built on stilts, even though you may not be able to see the stilts. And you wonder, what do they know that we don't? I mean, these are multi-million-dollar homes that are going up, but you're saying get ready for flooding.
Absolutely not. You know, what we find when we talk to realtors, to builders, to home buyers is a lot of people have this in the back of their minds. They're aware of sea level rise. They're aware that the risks are increasing. But when they're thinking about all of the priorities for where they want to build a house or where they want to buy a house, it comes fairly down the list. They don't think that it's a serious issue. We see some people who are absolutely not. You know, I recently purchased a house in New Jersey. There was no way was I buying in a floodplain because I'm aware of the increasing risks. The increasing risks are not just flooding, but they're also financial. Right now, flood insurance is mandated by kind of mortgage companies, and it's also subsidized by the federal government. It's costing taxpayers a lot of money. Eventually, you would expect Congress would reach a point where they're sick of subsidizing these coastal residences and are going to start taking away some of those subsidies, and at that point you'll see, you know, a real spike in insurance rates, and people who have been living in coastal areas or who have holiday houses in their coastal areas will no longer be able to afford their flood insurance. Now, if your mortgage company requires it, maybe you default on your mortgage. If you own it outright, then maybe you keep living there until it gets destroyed by a storm and you decide not to rebuild. But we will be seeing more and more houses being abandoned along the shoreline. That will lead to more blight. That attracts all kinds of issues such as mosquitoes, which can spread disease. It causes crime issues within neighborhoods. So people who are making these purchases right now oftentimes are aware that it's a bit of a gamble, but they might not have comprehended what type of a gamble we're talking about here.
And short term and long term, both yearly and over 30 years, as you said. The heart of your research is about climate change and rising sea levels. So talk to us about the latest research in climate change.
Well, generations of scientists have been building this body of knowledge and information. We can now simulate what happens when you increase carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere, heat trapping pollution from fossil fuels, simulate what that means for global temperatures, and then look at what that means for impacts such as heat waves, hurricanes, and so forth. Now, we're on a course where we're continuing to put out a lot of fossil fuel pollution. We're causing a lot of climate change. And we know from our observations that this is having real effects in terms of worse heat waves, the types of flooding that we're talking about. So we've got that's one factor that's going on. But here in the Mid-Atlantic, here in this area, we have another issue, which is that the land is naturally sinking. This is a natural geological process that's kind of accelerated by groundwater pumping. But so you have the land sinking at the same time that seas are rising, And then you have this additional factor, which is rebuilding after Sandy. So you have a lot of new construction along vulnerable coastal areas. We also have come out of the 2008 recession, which really killed the construction market. So we're seeing a boom in housing in this area, and a lot of the time that's coinciding with the areas that are really going to be facing the most risks both now and in the decades to come.
Not everybody has fully espoused your beliefs and the research that organizations like Climate Central does. The president is one of them. We want to play a quick soundbite really quickly from something he recently said related to climate change. Let's take a listen.
We do have an impact, but I don't believe the impact is nearly what some say. I don't think it's a hoax. I think there's probably a difference, but I don't know that it's man-made. I want a great climate. We're going to have that, and we're going to have forests that are very safe, because we can't go through this every year.
We're talking about a president who does not embrace science, who does not even embrace facts. So his comments on climate change are very consistent with his worldview, which is to kind of deny the reality of what we see around us. So although we have a federal government that's full of members of Congress plus an administration that are not particularly interested in climate change or solving it, and actually proactively go out of their way to dismiss very real dangers that science, generations of scientists have been warning us about. So even though we have that scenario, all is not lost. We do see a lot of people across the US coming together and working really hard to tackle this issue. The federal government recently released a report which Trump has actually responded to, saying he didn't believe a lot of the findings from their own scientists. That report has come out and it really highlighted just the extent of action across this country where people are working hard to adapt, working hard to reduce their impacts. But the report also noted that much, much more is needed. This is really just a start. If we want to protect ourselves, protect our health, protect the economy, protect America's security moving forward for the decades and years to come, we need to do much more.
John Upton with Climate Central. Thank you for coming on.
So
really
great to be
appreciate
here.
your
Thank
insight.
So a couple of things there. There was a broad scope that he gave, but he made it very personal. They took it down to a neighborhood. They talked about the ground now sinking in Delaware and parts of New Jersey. They talked about places on the Jersey Shore. They talked about the cost of insurance going forward. They talked about where would your kids play, even if you build your house up on stilts. They talked about the fact that there are brand new homes, not rebuilding, brand new homes being built in these areas. Now that's fine. People should build wherever they want, but they should know what the consequences are. And they shouldn't hold everybody else responsible and cry about it. We were fair and balanced. You had to include the president in there. You have to include comments by both sides to do that. You can't just drive something straight down the middle. So what were your takes? Did you think that this was something that would have now, certainly maybe not as much in San Diego, but if you lived in this area, would this have talked to you personally?
I think the idea of making it the life of the mortgage.
Yes.
Very
Exactly.
people.
Exactly. You're buying a house. It's the same with a job. If you have a job in one of these places, but you're buying a house, and in 30 years, you're going to be maybe wanting to sell it, move to a condo somewhere, or assisted living, or back wherever your grandkids are, or whatever you want to do. And all of a sudden, you find out you can't sell the house, or you have to sell it at such a discounted rate. That is a huge one, and that made it very personal. I think when you talk money, I mean, let's admit it, Americans, most of the time, there's all these issues before the election, and then what happens? Vote the pocketbook. It just seems to be that way. Not everybody, but that just seems to be the swell of what it comes down to. And let's face it, a lot of people live paycheck to paycheck. And it is hard. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on out there in the world to distract you. I mean, you've got government furloughs, you've got single parents, you've got teacher strikes, you've got what's going on with the border. I mean, there's just so much stuff. And then your own personal stuff. So to look at a huge issue like climate change, you have to make it personal. And when you talk mortgages, you make it personal. Yes.
So I heard a lot of really good presentation skills. I heard impacts, I heard adaptation, I heard resilience, I heard something about science, I heard, that was all very good. What I didn't hear very much was that it's human caused, largely human caused. There are all these other factors also, but he kind of said it, but then he glossed over it. I didn't hear that as much as I would have liked. And also the opportunity to respond and mitigate climate change and what that means into moving into a renewable economy. I didn't hear that either. So my question is, this kind of presentation, which is kind of unusual,
Oh yeah, no, this was a Sunday morning show, so that's why this was so long. I mean, this would be 1 minute on the news in any other day part other than this.
So in such a long presentation, I would have liked to have seen more emphasis on the human caused aspects of climate change and also the opportunities about doing something about it. The real $10 trillion opportunity of moving to a renewable climate, that sort of renewable energy economy, that sort of thing. So my question to you is, in other presentations, how much are these other aspects emphasized?
You know what? They can be, and they have been. This particular piece was more on what is happening and the real estate aspect of it, and that's why it leaned toward the mortgages, making it personal. I think in order to do what you're talking about, you need to make that deeply personal too. You can't just talk about the human causation. You have to talk about what this community, what this block, what the people who live on Street H are doing and how much they are contributing to what's going into the atmosphere. You need to make it so personal that people go, I am? Because no, they think it's China and India. It can't be the United States, come on. We're going green. We recycled in the 70s. How'd that go? They pick up my recycling, I'm pretty sure it goes in with my trash. So I think this is the problem, is the personalization of that. And this was not a piece to exemplify that, but I don't think there are very many that do what you're asking. Because, again, science, you talk science, and this is what the public does. If you don't talk it in layman's terms and really make it that way, kids kind of get it because they're, I don't want to say it's forced on them in school, but they're interested in it. So you have a very valid point. An absolute valid point. Here, this is a good example. Scientific terms versus public meaning. These are the scientific terms, and this is what the public is hearing. Enhance, improve, aerosol. That's a spray can. No, it isn't. It's a tiny particulate in the atmosphere. Positive trend. That means it's good. No, not always. Theory, hunch. No, it's not a hunch. Uncertainty, ignorance. No. Error, wrong, no. Bias, political motive, no. In science, a bias is not a political motive. Sign, no, it is not an Aquarian. Values, monetary, values are not always related to money. Manipulation, tampering, no, it is not. But that's what the public thinks. You say manipulation, this is what they think. So that's why you need to speak differently. Anomaly, abnormal, no, an anomaly isn't always abnormal. And scheme, devious plot. No, it is not a devious plot when you're talking about it in science. So this is what happens. The reports come out and they say these things, and this is why you lose people right away. They become suspicious. Look at all those things on the other side. Devious, scheme, plot, wrong, political motive. Why would they want to listen to a scientific report? Unless you put it into public speak, which is important. Now, the other thing is, what do people care about? They care about their mortgage? Damn, Skippy, I care about this morning. My coffee. I drink 1 cup a day. Mine is sitting there getting cold, and I can tell you the loss of coffee land. You put it in these types of terms. Now, this is on another part of the world, but when people hear it, thinking, wow, coffee's going to go up even more, and then you break it down even further. You say, this is how it's going to happen. Rising temperatures are going to damage the beans, and they're going to increase the droughts, which will cut the yields, and they're going to advance the pests, which are going to kill the plants and stress the plants, and then we're going to have to come up with some modified plant, some GMO thing that nobody wants either. And you tell people this, and this is just one thing, coffee. Not everybody's as passionate about coffee. What about your beer? Because I can tell you, this is just an example, and you could, if you had the full graphic, you could tap on your state, you could see what the economic impact is. Now look at this. Who knew? Pennsylvania was no surprise on Colorado being right up there, the impact, but Pennsylvania. It talks about how many breweries, microbreweries, the cost per person, the impacts it would have, and this is how you break it down. You can start with a quick national map and go, look at this. Let's talk about Pennsylvania. We live in Pennsylvania. You can go right in, then you can pick your city and you can talk about it. How does this affect here? Now, the point is that in the Pacific Northwest, they grow all the hops. Well, it's trying to dry out now, and they're not going to be looking at the hop crop. in the future that they have right now, which is going to impact the cost of beer and making beer. And we're going to have to then go to Europe, where their hop crop is also having trouble because of climate change. So that makes it deeply personal to those who love their beer. How about personal health? Your allergies. This is a Philadelphia chart up to 2017 showing a longer season for all of those allergy-producing ragweeds and pollens. So this is important. I mean, if you have a kid who has a seasonal allergy like mine, between the months of March and June, his nose looks like a waterfall. This is important, and we feel it on those super days. And the warmer the planet gets, the more we see, the more pollen, the more CO2 is produced. We see this happen. How about mosquitoes? Is anybody worried about West Nile? Because the Northeast is a hotbed for it. So when you see this jump in days, this is Pittsburgh, you have to be concerned. How much DEET am I going to put on my kid? Am I going to get my yard sprayed because that's chemicals I don't want? Do I just not go outside during the summer and the fall? I have this gorgeous yard, all these trees. I live in the middle of nature, and I'm just not going to go outside because I don't want to be bit by a mosquito, and now it's getting worse. How about your personal comfort? So here we are in Philadelphia. The days over 95 have climbed 5.1 more days on average. Now, certainly this goes up and down. Some years not so much, some years a lot more, but that is the steady climb. And this is what's expected. This many more days with a heat index above 105. I mean, that's an oppressive heat index. That is hard on the human body. And if you have those day after day after day, there's a cumulative effect, which is why they issue heat advisories and also warnings out there. And then there's more rain. Okay, if you live in Philadelphia, you heard me and Glenn and everybody else on TV talk about the fact that this was the second wettest year, 2018, on record. 2011 was the wettest. We missed it by like an inch. Yeah. New Jersey, yeah, it just didn't stop raining, did it? It just rained. I think all of December it rained. It certainly was warmer, but it rained, and that's all we've seen lately. We haven't seen snowstorms. Do you know that we're 5 inches below average for December and January? The snow we got, the 3.5 inches in Philadelphia, and there was more in parts of New Jersey, especially Brigantine with that one little storm. That was all in November. There was a November snowstorm, and now pretty much nothing, especially after last year. And then if you like to garden, pull this one out, gardener's grief. Your fruit trees need a certain amount of cold to produce the fruit that you like to get off those trees. So you're out there gardening like crazy, you're fertilizing them, you're trimming them, you're pruning them, you're waiting, and bupkis. Because the warmer it gets, your trees are going to produce nothing or very little or ick. How about winter sports? I'm a snow skier. But let's go to one of my favorite places that loves their winter sports. They have the oval there. They pride themselves on training all of the Olympic speed skaters, and that would be in Milwaukee. Well, they've warmed this much since 1970, their winters. So they're climbing on average. Wisconsin is the snowmobile capital of the United States. I don't know if you know that or not, but there are plenty of winters where they have subpar snow to go snowmobiling. I mean, they rip it all up in the northern half of Wisconsin. Anybody from Wisconsin? Think I asked before. So you know what I'm talking about, right? I mean, Wisconsinites, they love their snow. I love Vilas County. Go on up there, watch the snow come down, unless it doesn't. Now, it's not one size fits all because this is Los Angeles and they're just flatlined. I'm sure there's a lot of other contributing factors to this, but you cannot sell that message in Los Angeles. So again, you have to personalize. Don't be telling Los Angeles that their winter temperatures are changing. They don't care. It's La La Land, it's warm, it's nice, they got a tan, they got a convertible, they got a beach. You got to find something else to sell in Los Angeles. Maybe the drought. How about the wildfires? How about the smoke? Yeah. This girl grew up in San Diego. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Now, this is back to the slide that Rosemary had. This is water level 1 foot increase. So you show somebody this big map. You're like, look at this map. Oh, what happens if it goes up 10 feet? Did I see the change? I'm like, not sure. Did I? No. So make it personal. Oh, wow. I live on that block. It's blue now. That's bad. Very, very bad. That's only a 4 foot change. That's even worse. That's not the 10 foot change. 10 foot change, it's all blue. So you make it personal, right down to the neighborhood, when you're telling your stories, when you're recruiting people, when you're talking to your politicians. This is what you want to do. They want to be able to hear from the communities and be personal. How about billion-dollar disasters? Because we are all paying for them. It does not matter where you live, you're going to be paying for them. Texas, of course, they've had plenty of them. They've had the drought, and they've had the hurricanes, they've had the tornadoes. But you can see, surprisingly, California on the low end, and theirs are pretty much, when you're talking natural disasters, we're not talking earthquakes, wildfires. And the wildfire season goes on and on every single year. Here's Home Sweet Home. This is a home in Delaware. Is this the American dream? Regular coastal flooding. We had it in Ventnor last week, not far from here. The King Tide in Miami, it's famous. Just driving your nice car, your Mercedes, through that salt water, that's got to be good, right? Hoping you don't go a little bit too far to the right and end up in one of those retention ponds and drown. The cost to elevate the home, the cost to insure the elevated home, because there's still a cost. The cost to evacuate every time it looks like it's going to be too high and you got to get out of there because you can't go home for a day or so. The cost to maintain all the property and the roads around there because the water keeps flowing over them. The cost of extra services for the community to provide for you. And the value after your mortgage is paid. Maybe it goes up. In Florida, it seems like there's no end to going up. But these are things to think about. Your personal future. Will your job exist 20 to 30 years from now? With climate change, is another corporation going to buy yours? We're not talking about the coal factories, but we're just talking about any company. Going green or not, will you need to relocate to keep a job? Careers of the future, what are they really going to be in the world in the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years? What will Gen X and, Gen Y, and it should say Gen Z, not Gen X. My son is a Gen Z. I can't believe I'm Gen Z. What will they do? What will they be looking forward to? Because really, they're going to carry the burden of this forward. How do you prepare them? Are they buying into all of this? Relatable timeline. Let's not just say in the year 2100. Let's make a relatable timeline. In 5 years, in 10 years, when your child graduates from high school, when your child graduates from college, when your house is paid off. Let's make it relatable. Food sources. Where are they going to come from? With drought and everything else going on? Water sources. We still have a house in Chicago. I told my husband, I said, we're going to keep that. We're renting that baby out because those Great Lakes, the states have locked that water in. The federal government can't take it. They can't ship it down to Atlanta when they need it. They can't let Japan buy it. They have the states made ironclad laws to protect that water. And those states can't take another drop out. Each state has what they're allowed to have. That water is going to be so valuable someday because 22% of the Earth's fresh water that's available is in those Great Lakes. So that's a pretty big deal. Your water sources are going to be hard to come by. Your health, what's your health going to be like, and your wealth. What's it going to cost you to clean this up and to stay on the straight and narrow path? It's hard to ignore things like this, wildfires like this. How do I know? I flew in 2007 to where I grew up in San Diego County. And this was one of the wildfires, one of the worst. And I flew over knowing that my house, my family's house, all my friends' houses were inside that smoke. This is my uncle. I'm standing next to him, and their house is gone. Yeah. My family has lost a house. He's lost a house. This is in the countryside. Doing everything right, clearing it. This is farmland, farming and ranch land. This is where I grew up. I mean, we didn't build in a flood zone. We built in an area where we cleared it. But the population has moved out, and in this instance, there was some camper that, I don't know, I think this is the one day. This is somebody that was lost, and they lit a signal fire on a high fire day. So I made it personal. I told stories, blogs, I was on the web, I did TV stuff, I flew out, I covered it. I made it very personal, which is what you have to do to drive it home. So, that's how I feel, but it really kind of falls on all of you to really kind of pick this up and make it personal, make it individual. Because this is really where we are right now. This is an individual. This is people screaming out the windows saying, we're not going to take this anymore. This is BS. We're not going to wait for the government to do something, for some huge entity, as you spoke about, to do something. You guys have done a lot. Look at what you have done. You have a bill that has been introduced. That's fantastic. So all of this means personalize it. Make it something people can understand, and make it something people want to buy into. Don't make it something global, not a global blanket. It has to be very personal to the people that you're talking to. Don't tell somebody in Denver about the flooding in New Jersey or Florida. talk to them about what they want to hear about. Does anybody have any? I know I've got to wrap it up. Any questions? Yes.
I'm from western Pennsylvania, so it's fossil fuel country.
Yep.
I tried to crack the code at the TV stations, and I get absolute silence about the TV. Who do I talk to? The station manager, the program director?
You know, the thing is that you could, I know that there's going to be a lot more initiatives being rolled out in a lot of television stations. If you have a great idea, a simple idea, and a lot of these little graphics we will fit into our newscast, you can contact the meteorologist, you can send something to community affairs if you have events and things like that. It's all about the amount of time that they have to spend on television. But if you suggest that you have a story that'd be fantastic for their digital platform, you might get a lot further. The digital platform really has grown, and they push to it. It's on all the apps, and I mean, let's face it, everything is on my phone. It doesn't live on my phone, it doesn't live. And I watch TV on my phone, and that's where it is all going. So this is what's really, really important for you to realize. Yes?
Sorry, we're just gonna have to cut it
Okay.
because we're really behind.
Okay.
Tammie, would you be available to answer questions right afterwards?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Let's give Tammie a great.